Hi guys. So I just wanted to pop on here and talk about limiting beliefs for a second. We often make our limiting beliefs something that we believe is impossible to overcome. Okay. So maybe it's well, I'm a food addict. Maybe it's I'm an emotional eater. That's just what I am. Or maybe it's I'm not a morning person. I never have been. I never will be. Maybe it's I'm a diabetic. Maybe it's I have depression and anxiety, or maybe it is some other diagnosis or some other label that you've placed on yourself or your situation. Okay, that is can commonly be perceived to be over impossible to overcome. Okay, why do we do that? It means that we don't have to show up the same way, right? So I know when I had placed a label on myself um, as depressed and someone that had debilitating anxiety at times, I know that that took the pressure off of me having to show up in a different way. It meant that I didn't have to take responsibility for some of my behaviors and my actions. Okay, and I'm not saying that this is the case for everyone in those situations. I'm just explaining, my situation and what sometimes we allow ourselves to do with these labels. Okay, it means that we don't have to be vulnerable and then possibly fail, right? Let's take food for an example. Obviously, I work with people and food and eating all day, every day, right? So, well, I'm a food addict. Okay. So to even try anything else, and then maybe not be perfect in that attempt, you have to be vulnerable to do that. And then you have to deal with the sense of failure and the shame and the guilt and all of that. And it just compounds things, right? So I want you to think about your limiting belief. And is it something that you've placed on yourself because you're afraid to fail? Is it something that you've placed on yourself because it takes the pressure off of having to show up in a different way, or having to take responsibility for a particular behavior or situation? Okay, because this is really important to understand. If you can identify that, then you can work on it at a deeper level, which is really the root cause. These things are symptoms of something deeper. Okay, food issues, very, very, very oftentimes we can trace them back to a relationship with yourself and a desire for love, or when did you feel most celebrated in your life? It was when you went out to a restaurant to celebrate something, right? Whether it was for yourself or someone else. So that created this pattern that this is how I celebrate and this is how I feel loved, right? That was your reward system. Oh, let's have ice cream, or that'll make you feel better, right? So it became our expression of love to ourselves, and it's challenging to learn how to love ourselves in different ways sometimes, right? Because it's challenging, right? The very nature of the word. So we want to make sure that or we remember that we get to not only define our success, but we also get to define failure. Okay. So you can sit there and, well, failure means I fell short. I can't do this. I'm not enough. I'll never be enough. I'm never going to be able to overcome this. I have this diagnosis. I have this pattern. I have these genetics. I have, right? And we own all of that and we hold on to it, right? And that's how we define our failure sometimes. But what if you could sit there and you could you could look at it in a different way? What if you could change that perspective? Okay. If we're reading a book right now. We have a book club called The Gap and the Gain, and it's the basic premise of the book, right? Being in the gap versus being in the gain, right? And how we define these experiences in our life. Okay, let's say healthy eating. Everybody made a New Year's resolution, right? I'm sure you made a New Year's resolution of some kind, right? So let's say, for example, it was to eat healthier, right? And on day five, maybe it didn't even take you that long, maybe 5 minutes into it, you ate something that you knew was unhealthy, and that's it. See that? I can't even do that. And you just throw in the towel and the rest of the year is shot. That's being in the gap. But what if you could say, you know what, I made it 5 minutes longer than I would have made it if I hadn't tried at all. Okay, and I'm gonna celebrate that 5 minutes. And then you get to decide how you want to celebrate that, and you get to start reprogramming those reward pathways. You get to start redefining expressions of love and celebration and all of that, right? Let's say you made it 5 days. That was 5 days that you made it without, that you wouldn't have done before if you hadn't tried. If you hadn't tried, you would have not made it at all. So it's measuring yourself from where you began, okay, to choose to draw motivation from that, right? To continue going, to not stop there, okay? Maybe your goal was a 10-day cleanse this year, and you made it all 10 days, and okay, the cleanse is over, we got there, okay? And then we stop there. We get stuck in the there. We made a goal, maybe we reached it, we set an intention, we got there, but then we stayed there. No! To start again. The goal sometimes, or the intention sometimes, is not to finish or to accomplish, but to start again, to keep increasing, enhancing that pressure, that healthy pressure that drives us, and then that motivates us, and that encourages us, and ignites that fire to keep growing. I did that. I accomplished that. So I am capable. I am enough. I can do this. Now what can I do next? What can I tackle next? Okay. So that's measuring yourself in the gap versus measuring yourself in the gain. Even if it was just for that short, we define it as short, but for some people, not doing something for 5 minutes is a huge accomplishment. I know that there was a time where if I challenged myself to be happy, to genuinely feel happiness at my core, my soul, for 5 minutes, that would have been a freaking challenge. There was a time in my life when that would have been the case. So I don't care. I don't care what the length of time was. I don't care. I care if there was progress made at all. Okay. And I'm sure that there was, even if you thought about it for 5 minutes, maybe it wouldn't have even have been a consideration before. Maybe before you wouldn't even have been able to identify that situation, let alone change the behavior or do anything about it in any way. Okay. So it's still a gain. So calling something a failure is a lie that we tell ourselves so that we can stop trying. Okay. Don't get caught up in this cycle. It doesn't have to be that way, okay? This makes you a liar. It makes you a fraud. So why would we do that? We're not liars. We're not frauds. Get out of that. And maybe that's where we were in our group talking about the words that we use and the language that we use, right? And being able to identify those things, right? Call yourself out on it. I'm being a liar right now. I am lying to myself by calling that a failure because this is what I gained in that experience, okay? I am a fraud if I am going to show up as anything less than everything I was made to be and everything that I am capable of doing by lying to myself and saying I can't do this. My genetics, my gene, whatever the excuse is, okay? So the real issue is that we're measuring ourselves against an ideal, okay? And that ideal is always changing because let me tell you something, whether it's money, whether it's health, I reached a level of health that I thought was, at one time I would have thought was completely unattainable. And then I said, let's go further. Okay, so that ideal is always changing. That once you get there, you want to get to the next there. You want to start again with the next challenge and to continue to grow, right? So that ideal is always changing and evolving and growing, right? But where you came from is also always changing and evolving and growing, right? So measuring yourself against your growth, and you're going to start to see that expansion, and you're going to start to see the impact that not only is it making in your own life, but that it's making in everyone's life around you, because they're watching you, because there are relationships there that are being impacted, whether it's a spouse, whether it's a cousin, whether it's a friend, whether it's a sibling, I don't care what it is, whether it's the person at the grocery store that you can smile at now genuinely And yet where before you would have felt it to be an invasion of your space in some way. Okay, so it can be all of these things, and we get to define this based on what areas we decide that we want to show up as, right? And looking at those triggers as opportunities. Okay, you're triggered in some way for a reason. Let's get to the bottom of it. Okay, don't stop there. So when you start measuring your growths, you see your gain, you want to keep going. Our words are so powerful, and we can allow them to keep us in this little box, or we can just burst out of that and choose to heal. So who's with me? Okay, you want to burst out of that box and you want to choose to heal. You want to get going. Let's go. I'm all here. I'm all in. If you're all in, comment I am all in.